The Amber Room was once called the eighth wonder of the world. Imagine a chamber where the walls weren't just painted or wallpapered, but were instead covered in over 6 tons of intricately carved amber panels, backed with gold leaf and studded with mirrors. It was a breathtaking sight, glowing with a beautiful, warm light. The story starts in the early 18th century, when the room was first designed for King Frederick I of Prussia. His son later gifted it to Tsar Peter the Great of Russia in 1716 to seal a political alliance. The room was installed in the Catherine Palace near St. Petersburg, where it became a treasured symbol of the Russian Empire for nearly 2 centuries. But then came World War II, when the Nazis invaded the Soviet Union. They specifically targeted cultural treasures, and the Amber Room was at the top of their list. Soviet curators tried to disassemble and hide the room, but the old amber had become too brittle. In the end, they just tried to cover it with wallpaper, hoping it wouldn't be found. It didn't work. The Nazis located it, dismantled the entire chamber in just 36 hours, and shipped it to Königsberg Castle in Germany. As the war reached its final chaotic months in 1945, the room's trail goes cold. It was last seen packed into crates in the castle's basement, just before the city was heavily bombed by the Allies, and then captured by the Soviets. After that, it simply vanished. Some believe it was destroyed in the bombings, others think it was loaded onto a ship that was sunk, and a few still believe it's hidden somewhere, waiting to be found. To this day, the fate of the Amber Room remains one of the greatest unsolved mysteries of World War II. The Flor de la Mar, or Flower of the Sea, was a Portuguese carrack that had a long and storied career in the early 16th century. It was a massive ship for its time, serving in major naval battles and helping Portugal build its empire in the East Indies. But it's not the ship's service that made it legendary. It's the incredible treasure it was carrying on its final, fateful voyage. In 1511, the famed Portuguese conqueror, Afonso de Albuquerque, led a successful invasion of the Sultanate of Malacca, a wealthy trading port in modern-day Malaysia. After conquering the city, Albuquerque plundered its immense riches. The spoils included 60 tons of gold from the Sultan's palace, chests filled with precious jewels, and an array of priceless artifacts, including golden thrones and a collection of exotic animals. This vast hoard, along with tribute from the King of Siam, was loaded onto the Flor de la Mar for the trip back to Portugal. With Albuquerque himself on board, the treasure-laden ship set sail. But the ship was old and had been repaired many times. It was also dangerously overloaded. As it made its way along the coast of Sumatra, it was caught in a violent storm in the Strait of Malacca. The ship was battered by high winds and powerful waves, and its aging hull couldn't take the strain. The Flor de la Mar broke in two and sank almost immediately, taking its legendary riches down with it. Albuquerque barely survived, escaping on a simple raft with a handful of his men, but the treasure was lost to the sea. To this day, it is considered one of the most valuable shipwrecks in history, with some estimates putting its worth in the billions of dollars. And despite over 500 years of searching, its location remains a complete mystery. While some treasures are lost to war or swallowed by the sea, others are hidden in the earth, their locations guarded by a single person. This is the story of America's most famous lost treasure, the Lost Dutchman's gold mine. For over a century, its legend has been whispered among prospectors, a tale of a fabulously rich gold mine hidden somewhere in the cruel beauty of the Superstition Mountains of Arizona. The heart of the story belongs to a man named Jacob Waltz. He was a German immigrant, often mistaken for being a Dutchman due to the way German or Deutsch was pronounced. In the late 1800s, Waltz would occasionally appear in the city of Phoenix to buy supplies, paying for everything with incredibly high-grade gold ore. When asked where he got it, he would just point toward the forbidding Superstition Mountains and say nothing more. Waltz guarded his secret his entire life, but in 1891, as he lay on his deathbed, he supposedly shared the mine's location with a neighbor named Julia Thomas, who had cared for him in his final days. He gave her a series of cryptic clues, describing landmarks and sightlines that would lead to a mine so full of gold that it could be picked from the walls in chunks. He told her to look for a rock that looked like a face, and that from a certain point she would see a military trail. Then he died. Armed with these clues, Julia Thomas set out to find her inheritance, but she came back empty-handed. In the decades since, thousands of other prospectors, armed with maps, theories, and unshakable hope, have tried to retrace Waltz's steps. The search has become a legend in itself, claiming dozens of lives through accidents, heat stroke, and even rumored violence. To this day, no one has ever found the lost Dutchman's mine, whether it's a real place packed with gold or just a tall tale spun by an old prospector. Its allure remains as strong as ever. It is a legendary fortune, a secret that Jacob Waltz took with him to the grave. Some treasures aren't just valuable, they're breathtaking works of art, symbols of a lost world of impossible opulence. This is the story of the Imperial Feyberge eggs. Between 1885 and 1917, the House of Feyberge created 50 of these intricate, jeweled eggs as Easter gifts for the Russian Tsars Alexander III and Nicholas II. Each one was a unique masterpiece, and each one held an incredible surprise inside. The tradition began in 1885 when Tsar Alexander commissioned an egg for his wife, the Empress. On the outside, it looked like a simple white enamel hen's egg, but it twisted open to reveal a golden yolk. The yolk opened to reveal a golden hen, and inside the hen were two final surprises: a tiny diamond replica of the imperial crown and a small ruby pendant. The Empress was so delighted that it became an annual tradition, with each new egg becoming more elaborate and imaginative than the last. But then came the Russian Revolution in 1917. The Romanov dynasty was overthrown, and the imperial family was executed. In the chaos, Bolshevik forces seized the palaces and confiscated the royal family's vast treasures, including the collection of Feyberge eggs. They were catalogued and packed into crates in the Kremlin armory. For a time they were safe, but forgotten. In the 1920s and 30s, the new Soviet government was desperate for cash. To raise money, they began selling off many of these priceless imperial treasures to Western buyers. The Feyberge eggs were scattered across the globe, ending up in museums, royal collections, and the homes of wealthy collectors. But during all this upheaval, not all the eggs were accounted for. Of the 50 imperial eggs that were made, the locations of most are known today, but 8 of them simply vanished. For decades, they were presumed lost forever. Then in 2012, a scrap metal dealer in the American Midwest bought a small golden egg at a flea market for about $13,000, hoping to melt it down for its gold. It sat in his kitchen for years until he finally Googled the name etched on it and realized he was holding the 3rd imperial egg, which had been missing for almost a century. He had a $33 million masterpiece on his kitchen counter, and that means the other 7 missing eggs could still be out there, hidden in plain sight, just waiting to be stumbled upon. Of all the pirates who roamed the seas during the Golden Age, one name stands above all others: Blackbeard. He wasn't just a pirate, he was a living nightmare, a master of psychological warfare who cultivated an image of pure terror. With his massive black beard, which he would horrifyingly tie with ribbons and stuff with slow-burning fuses, he created a cloud of smoke around his head that made him look like a demon emerging from hell. From the Caribbean to the coasts of colonial Virginia and the Carolinas, his name was enough to make entire ports surrender without a fight. For 2 years, Blackbeard plundered ships, amassing a fortune that became the stuff of legend. But unlike most pirates who spent their money as fast as they made it, Blackbeard was said to be different. He supposedly boasted that he had buried his vast treasure in a secret location, a place so hidden that only he and the devil knew where it was. He never made a map, trusting only himself with the secret to his incredible wealth. It all came to a dramatic end in November 1718. The governor of Virginia, desperate to stop the pirates' reign, sent 2 sloops commanded by Lieutenant Robert Maynard to hunt him down. They cornered Blackbeard and his crew at Ocracoke Inlet, North Carolina. The battle was brutal and personal. Blackbeard fought furiously, but was finally overwhelmed and killed, reportedly shot 5 times and cut more than 20. When Maynard's men searched Blackbeard's ship, they found some gold and supplies, but it was nowhere near the legendary amounts he was rumored to possess. The bulk of the fortune was missing, and with that, the greatest treasure hunt in pirate lore began. Blackbeard's secret had died with him. For 300 years, that terrifying boast has fueled endless searches. Treasure hunters have scoured islands, coves, and beaches all along the American coast and throughout the Caribbean, digging for a fortune that may or may not even exist. And to this day, the legendary lost treasure of Blackbeard remains just that, a legend, waiting to be unearthed. In 1820, the city of Lima, Peru, was in a state of panic. The Peruvian War of Independence was raging, and rebel forces were closing in on the city. The Spanish viceroy, responsible for protecting Lima's staggering wealth, made a desperate decision. He decided to move the city's treasure for safekeeping. We're talking about a fortune so vast it's hard to imagine. 11 boatloads of gold statues, silver bars, and chests overflowing with priceless jewels, including a life-size solid gold statue of the Virgin Mary encrusted with gems. The viceroy entrusted this entire hoard to a British sea captain named William Thompson and his ship, the Mary Dear. The plan was simple. Thompson would sail the treasure to Mexico for safekeeping, with Spanish guards on board to make sure everything went smoothly. He was supposed to wait there until Spain had crushed the rebellion, and then return the riches to Lima. But once they were out on the open ocean, temptation took over. Thompson and his crew had a different plan. They waited until the guards were asleep, then killed them and threw their bodies overboard. In an instant, they had turned from merchant sailors into pirates, and they were in possession of one of the greatest fortunes in the world. Now branded as outlaws, they couldn't just sail into a port and start spending their loot. They needed a place to hide it. Thompson steered the Mary Dear to a remote, uninhabited speck of land off the coast of modern-day Costa Rica, Cocos Island. There, he and his crew supposedly buried the entire treasure, creating a secret they planned to come back for later. Their new life as pirates, however, was short-lived. A Spanish warship soon captured the Mary Dear, and the entire crew was tried and sentenced to hang. To save their own lives, Thompson and his first mate agreed to lead the Spanish back to the buried loot. But once they arrived back on Cocos Island, the two men escaped into the dense jungle. They were never seen again, taking the secret of the treasure's location with them. And for 200 years, hundreds of expeditions have torn the island apart, searching for a fortune that remains lost to this day. This next story is about a treasure protected not by a jungle or the deep sea, but by an unbreakable code. In 1822, a Virginia innkeeper named Robert Morris was given a locked iron box by a mysterious guest named Thomas J. Beale. Beale had a wild story. He claimed he and a group of men had discovered a massive load of gold and silver out west, and had secretly transported it all the way back to Virginia to bury it. The box, Beale explained, contained papers that would lead to the fortune. He promised to mail Morris the key later. But the key never came. Thomas Beale was never seen or heard from again. For over 20 years, Morris kept his promise and left the box untouched. Finally, in 1845, he broke the lock. Inside were 3 sheets of paper covered in numbers, and a letter from Beale explaining what they were. The pages were 3 separate ciphers. The first described the location of the treasure, the second listed its contents, and the third contained the names of the treasure's 30 rightful owners. Morris spent the rest of his life trying to decode the numbers, but got nowhere. Before he died, he passed the strange papers to a friend. This friend had a flash of inspiration. He guessed it might be a book cipher, where each number corresponds to a word in a specific text. He tried one of the most famous documents in American history, the Declaration of Independence. It worked. Using the Declaration as a key, the friend was able to decode the second cipher, number by number. It revealed a staggering list. The treasure consisted of over 2,900 pounds of gold and more than 5,000 pounds of silver, plus a stash of jewels. A massive fortune, described in perfect detail. But that was the only cipher anyone has ever solved. The key to the second cipher didn't work on the other 2. For over a century, the world's best cryptographers and countless treasure hunters have all tried to crack the code, and they have all failed. The first cipher, the one holding the exact location of all that gold and silver, remains a complete mystery. The directions to one of America's greatest lost treasures are written on a single sheet of paper for all to see, but no one can read them. As World War II raged across the Pacific, the Japanese Imperial Army didn't just conquer nations. They systematically looted them. From Burma to Singapore, they plundered banks, museums, government vaults, and private homes, amassing a fortune in gold bullion, jewels, and priceless religious and cultural artifacts. This wasn't just battlefield plunder. It was a highly organized operation to steal the wealth of an entire continent, a hoard so vast it's now known by a single legendary name, Yamashita's gold. The legend is named for General Tomoyuki Yamashita, the Tiger of Malaya. By 1944, the tide of the war had turned against Japan. The Allies were advancing, and there was no safe way to ship this immense treasure back to the Japanese mainland. The supposed solution was to hide it under Yamashita's command. The treasure was allegedly brought to the Philippines and buried in over 175 different sites, hidden deep within a complex network of tunnels, caves, and underground chambers. According to the stories, the engineers who designed the tunnels and the prisoners of war who dug them were sealed inside with the treasure when the work was done, ensuring the secret would be kept forever. After the war, Yamashita himself was captured, tried for war crimes, and executed in 1946. He never revealed the location of the treasure, and many believe he took the secret to his grave. For decades, the story remained a whispered legend. Then, in 1971, a Filipino locksmith named Rogelio Roxas claimed he had found one of the sites. He said he'd discovered a solid gold Buddha statue weighing a ton and countless chests of gold bars, but his discovery had a terrible twist. Roxas claimed that after he reported his find, agents of the Philippine president, Ferdinand Marcos, stormed his home, beat him, and stole the treasure. The story of what happened to Roxas became a famous court case, but it's just one chapter in a sprawling mystery. To this day, treasure hunters from around the world continue to search the Philippine Islands, digging for a lost fortune that, if real, would be the largest buried treasure in history. When the most powerful man on earth died in 1227, you would expect the world's grandest monument, but Genghis Khan, the founder of the largest contiguous land empire in history, wanted the exact opposite. According to his final wishes, he was to be buried in total secrecy in an unmarked grave somewhere in his homeland of Mongolia. He wanted to disappear back into the land he came from, and his followers were prepared to go to unbelievable lengths to grant that wish. The legend of his burial is as ruthless as his conquests. A vast funeral procession carried his body back across the plains. The soldiers escorting him had a chilling order: kill every single person and animal they encountered along the way to eliminate any witnesses. After the great Khan was laid to rest, supposedly in a tomb filled with treasures from his empire, the secrecy was taken to another horrifying level. First, the slaves who built the tomb were all executed. Then, the soldiers who killed the slaves were themselves killed by another group of guards. In some versions of the story, that final group of loyal guards was also killed, ensuring the secret of the tomb's location died with them completely. For nearly 800 years, the location of Genghis Khan's final resting place has remained one of history's most compelling mysteries. Despite modern technology and numerous expeditions, no one has ever found it. Some say a river was diverted to flow over the site, hiding it forever beneath the earth and water. Others believe it lies on or near a sacred mountain, an area still off limits to outsiders out of respect. Whatever the truth, the secret was kept. The man who conquered a vast portion of the known world successfully vanished from it, leaving behind a legendary mystery sealed in blood. In the world of sunken treasure, one name is spoken with more reverence than any other: the San Jose. It's often called the Holy Grail of shipwrecks, and for good reason. This Spanish galleon was carrying one of the largest single hauls of treasure ever assembled when it was lost to the sea. The story begins in 1708. During the War of the Spanish Succession, Spain was desperate for funds to finance the war, and the San Jose was tasked with a critical mission: transport an immense fortune from its New World colonies back to Europe. The ship was laden with a king's ransom in gold, silver, and emeralds from the mines of Peru, a cargo so vast its modern-day value is estimated in the billions of dollars. As the San Jose sailed off the coast of modern-day Colombia, near the city of Cartagena, it was ambushed by a British naval squadron. In the fierce battle that followed, a single shot from a British warship struck the San Jose's gunpowder magazine. The explosion was catastrophic. The galleon was torn apart and sank almost instantly, taking nearly all 600 people on board, and its legendary treasure down with it. In a matter of minutes, the fortune that was meant to fund a war had vanished beneath the waves. For more than 300 years, the San Jose was the stuff of legend, its resting place a complete mystery. Countless treasure hunters, dreamed of finding it. Then, in 2015, the Colombian government made a stunning announcement. They had finally located the wreck. Using an autonomous underwater vehicle, they captured incredible images of the site, including the ship's distinctive bronze cannons, engraved with dolphins, proving beyond all doubt that they had found the Holy Grail. But here is the final strange twist in the story. Finding the treasure and recovering it are two very different things. The moment the discovery was announced, an international legal battle erupted. Colombia claims the wreck as its own cultural heritage. Spain argues the ship is a naval war grave and still belongs to them. A US salvage company insists they found the location first and are owed a share. Even Bolivia has made a claim, stating that the wealth was originally mined by its indigenous people. Today, the San Jose's multi-billion-dollar cargo remains exactly where it has been for 3 centuries, resting quietly on the dark ocean floor, no longer lost to the sea, but trapped by a modern web of international law. Some treasures aren't swallowed by the sea, or buried on a remote island. They are simply stolen, in a crime so brazen it becomes a legend. This is the story of the Irish Crown Jewels, a priceless collection of gems that vanished from the heart of British power in Ireland. These weren't ancient royal crowns, but they were spectacular and immensely valuable, known officially as the jewels of the most illustrious order of St. Patrick. The set consisted of a star and a badge, both encrusted with hundreds of diamonds, Brazilian rubies, and enormous green emeralds. They were the glittering symbols of British authority, kept under lock and key in a specially constructed safe within the Bedford Tower of Dublin Castle. But in July of 1907, just days before King Edward VII was scheduled to visit Dublin, a shocking discovery was made. The jewels were gone. The theft was breathtakingly simple. The thief hadn't blown a safe or broken down a door. They had used a key. In an instant, a fortune in gems had disappeared from one of the most secure buildings in the country. The crime caused a massive scandal that embarrassed the entire British establishment. The king was furious. Suspicion immediately fell on the man in charge of the jewels, Sir Arthur Vicars, and his flamboyant inner circle. An official investigation was launched, but it was a dead end. No one was ever convicted. No arrests were ever made. And the Irish Crown Jewels were never seen again. They didn't turn up on the black market, and no ransom note ever appeared. Despite a huge reward and decades of theories and searches, the priceless regalia vanished without a trace, leaving behind only unanswered questions and the story of one of history's most audacious heists. Most lost treasures are the spoils of conquest or the loot of pirates, but this next one was the last hope of a dying nation, a fortune that vanished in the final, chaotic days of the American Civil War. This is the legend of the lost Confederate gold. In early April 1865, it was all over for the Confederacy. Union forces were closing in on its capital, Richmond, Virginia. With the city burning and defeat now certain, Confederate President Jefferson Davis and his cabinet made a desperate plan to escape south, hoping to regroup and continue the fight. They couldn't leave empty-handed. They gathered what was left of the Confederate treasury and packed it onto a heavily guarded train. The treasure was a mix of gold and silver bullion, foreign coins, and hundreds of thousands of Mexican silver dollars, worth somewhere around $500,000 at the time. It was a staggering fortune, and it represented the last remaining wealth of the Confederate government. The train carrying this hoard began a frantic, perilous journey southward, trying to outrun the advancing Union Army. As the government on the run moved deeper into the South, the treasure began to shrink. Some of it was used to pay off desperate soldiers. Some was entrusted to officials for safekeeping. Jefferson Davis himself was eventually captured in Georgia on May 10th, but when the Union soldiers searched his belongings, the bulk of the treasury was nowhere to be found. The trail of the main hoard goes cold just before Davis's capture. The last of the gold was supposedly divided up and hidden somewhere near Washington, Georgia, with the idea that it would fund a future uprising, but it simply disappeared. For over 150 years, rumors and whispered clues have fueled countless treasure hunts across the South, with people digging in fields, cellars, and forests. To this day, the fate of the final Confederate treasury remains one of the great unsolved mysteries of the Civil War, a lost fortune that vanished in smoke and defeat. Most treasure tales are passed down through whispers and legends, but this last one is unique. It's a treasure hunt literally written in stone, or more accurately, in metal. It begins with the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls, a collection of ancient Jewish manuscripts found in caves near the Dead Sea starting in the 1940s. These texts, mostly written on parchment and papyrus, are incredible religious and historical documents. They are priceless pieces of history. But in 1952, archaeologists found one scroll that was completely different from all the others. It wasn't made of fragile parchment. It was inscribed on two rolled-up sheets of almost pure copper, and when scholars carefully cut it open and translated the ancient Hebrew, they were stunned. It wasn't a religious text or a historical record. It was a list. This strange document, now known as the Copper Scroll, is a list of 64 different locations where an unbelievable amount of treasure is supposedly buried. It describes staggering quantities of gold and silver, by some estimates, dozens of tons, along with priestly vestments and other precious items. The directions are maddeningly cryptic, pointing to places like in the cistern, which is in the court of the small colonnade, or in the water conduit of the northern reservoir. For decades, scholars and treasure hunters have tried to decipher the scroll's clues. The problem is that the landscape of the Judean desert has changed dramatically over 2,000 years. The landmarks it describes have almost certainly vanished. To this day, not a single piece of this vast inventoried fortune has ever been conclusively found. The Copper Scroll remains one of history's greatest puzzles, a literal treasure map from the ancient world, whose secrets are still waiting to be unlocked. Some treasures are not judged by their weight in gold, but by the weight of their history. This is the story of the Anjo Masamune, perhaps the most famous and culturally significant sword in Japanese history. It was a flawless katana, forged in the 13th century by the legendary master swordsmith Goro Nudo Masamune. For Japan, it was considered a priceless national treasure, a perfect work of art, and a powerful symbol of the nation itself. For over 250 years, the sword was the prized possession of the Tokugawa shogunate, the military government that ruled Japan. It was passed down from one shogun to the next, a symbol of their absolute authority and the very soul of the samurai warrior class. The blade was said to have survived countless battles and political upheavals, a silent witness to centuries of Japanese history. But its long and celebrated history came to a sudden, baffling end after World War II. Following Japan's surrender, the American occupation authorities issued a directive ordering all Japanese families to turn in their swords. The goal was to disarm the population and prevent any potential uprisings. Wanting to set an example of peaceful compliance, the Tokugawa family made a difficult decision. They gathered their entire collection of historic swords, including the Honju Masamune, and dutifully handed them over to a local police station in Mijiro in December 1945. According to the records, a man identified only as a sergeant of the U.S. 7th Cavalry collected the swords a few weeks later, and then the Honju Masamune simply vanished. The trail went instantly cold. There are no definitive records of what happened to the sword next. The sergeant's identity and whereabouts have never been confirmed, and his name was likely misspelled in the transfer documents. A priceless symbol of Japan's heritage, looked after for centuries, wasn't stolen in a daring heist or lost in a fiery battle. It was simply swallowed by post-war bureaucracy, handed in peacefully, and lost forever. To this day, it remains one of Japan's most sought-after lost treasures, perhaps hanging unnoticed on a wall somewhere. Its unbelievable history completely unknown to its owner. In 1532, the vast and powerful Inca Empire was on the brink of collapse, facing a small but ruthless band of Spanish conquistadors, led by Francisco Pizarro. The conflict reached its tipping point with the shocking capture of the last Inca emperor, a man named Atahualpa. Held captive in the city of Cajamarca, Atahualpa quickly understood what his conquerors craved more than anything else. And so, in a desperate bid for his life, he made one of the most astounding promises in history. He offered to fill a large room, about 22 feet long, and 17 feet wide, once with gold, and then twice over with silver, all in exchange for his freedom. Pizarro greedily accepted the deal, and the great Inca Empire began to deliver, for months, a river of priceless artifacts. Golden plates and silver statues flowed into Cajamarca from every corner of the realm. But Pizarro grew impatient and paranoid. He worried about a potential Inca uprising, and so, on July 26, 1533, before the room was even completely filled, he went back on his word and had Atahualpa executed. The news of the emperor's murder spread like fire. Inca generals, who were leading additional caravans laden with treasure toward the city, were horrified. The legend says that upon hearing the news, they were commanded to stop. Instead of completing the delivery to their leader's killers, they hid the vast remaining portion of the ransom. Some say it was buried in a secret cave network, others that it was dumped into a remote lake in the Andes. Whatever happened, the secret died with them. And to this day, the lost part of Atahualpa's ransom remains one of the greatest legends of the New World, a hidden fortune waiting to be rediscovered. In the mythology of the American West, few names are as famous as Jesse James. After the Civil War, he and his gang became some of the most feared and celebrated outlaws in the country. For over a decade, they robbed banks, trains, and stagecoaches across the Midwest, becoming folk heroes to some and dangerous criminals to everyone else. The gang was incredibly successful, stealing what would be millions of dollars in today's money. But all that stolen cash and gold created a problem. The gang couldn't just walk into a town and start spending massive amounts of money without raising suspicion. And so, a powerful legend was born. The story goes that Jesse James, being a shrewd and cautious man, didn't trust banks. He supposedly buried his share of the loot in dozens of secret stashes all across the heartland, in places like caves in Missouri, under rocks in Oklahoma, or buried in kettles near creek beds. The idea was that he could come back for it later, bit by bit. After James was killed in 1882, these rumors exploded into a full-blown national treasure hunt. Armed with cryptic maps, family secrets, and local folklore, thousands of people began digging up the countryside, certain they would be the one to find the outlaw's hidden fortune. For well over a century, the search has continued, fueled by endless tales of buried gold. But here is the simple, hard fact. Despite all the stories and all the digging, not one single dollar of Jesse James's supposed buried treasure has ever been officially found or authenticated. Historians believe James and his gang likely spent the money as fast as they stole it to fund their operations and their lives on the run. And so the real treasure Jesse James left behind wasn't a stash of gold, but an enduring American myth that refuses to die. That's the strange final twist in the story of Jesse James. The treasure might not even exist. For all the searching and all the myths, historians are fairly certain the outlaw and his gang simply spent whatever they stole, and this reveals a fundamental split that runs through all of these tales. Some lost treasures are undeniably real. The San Jose is sitting on the ocean floor. The Copper Scroll is a physical list you can read. The Humjo Masamuni was handed over to a specific American sergeant. These are facts, but others, like the Lost Dutchman's Mine or Blackbeard's buried hoard, might be nothing more than a ghost story. A legend spun from a single boast or a dying man's cryptic whisper. And yet, we search for them all with the same desperate hope. So what is it that pulls us? Why do we spend centuries chasing a pirate's rumor with the same passion we use to hunt for a documented sunken galleon? Because in the end, the hunt isn't just about the gold or the jewels. It's about the possibility. It's about the conviction that a life-changing discovery, a link to a forgotten world, could be hiding just beneath the surface of our own. These stories tap into one of our oldest and most powerful fantasies, that a single moment of chance, a dusty flea market find, or a strange map can change everything. From the glowing panels of the Amber Room, swallowed by the chaos of war, to the billions in gold, from the Fleur de la Mar, waiting in the dark straits of Malacca, from a message no one can decode to a king's ransom meant for a murdered emperor. Each story leaves a tantalizing question mark hanging over history. And while most of these fortunes will likely remain lost forever, every now and then, the impossible happens. A scrap metal dealer buys a golden egg for a few $1,000s and learns he's holding a $33 million imperial masterpiece on his kitchen counter. It's a stunning reminder that some of these legends are true. The stories themselves have become their own kind of treasure. But the gold, the actual physical gold, could still be out there, hidden in a cave, a shipwreck, or plain sight, just waiting for the next chapter of its story to begin.